Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivas Adigaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Chalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudhirayet Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Ruttama Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 9, entitled Prahlad pacifies Lord Narasimhadev with prayers. Very, very beautiful chapter. Very, very exquisite prayers from Prahlad Maharaj. So we're reading text 10. Vipradishad gunayutad aravindanabha padaravinda vimukhat shvapacham vyarishtham manne madarpita mano vachane hitartha pranam punati sakulam nat bhurimanah विप्रादिशद्गुणवितात् अरविन्दनाभ पादारविन्दविमुखात् श्वपचं वरिष्ठम् मन्ये तदर्पितमनो वचने हितार्थ प्राणं पुनाति सकुलं न तु भूरिमानः विप्रादिशद्गुणयुतादरविन्दनाभ पादारविन्दविमुखात् श्वपचं वरिष्ठम् मन्ये मदर्पितमनो वचने हितार्थ प्राणं पुनाति सकुलं न तु भूरिमानः. Devotees can chant.
Hare Krishna. Well, would it be okay if I chant this to a different meter? Because I'm not familiar with the meter that you're chanting.
Yes, Prabhuji, whatever is comfortable.
Pripradvishad guna yutad aravindanabha padaravinda vimukat swapacham varishtam manyeta arpita mano vachane hitarta pranam gunati sakulam natu puriman.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Vipradvishadguna yutadaravindanabha Adaravinda Vimukat Swapacham Varishtam Manye Tadarpitamano Vachane Hitarta Pranang Punati Sakulam Natu Burimanaha.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll read the word for word synonyms. Viprat, then a Brahmana. Dvishad Gunayutat, qualified with 12 Brahmanical qualities. Aravindanabha, or Vishnu, who has a lotus growing from his navel. Pada Aravinda, to the lotus feet of the Lord. Vimukhat, not interested in devotional service. Shwapacham, one born in a low family or a dog eater. Shwapacham literally means one who cooks dogs. That's what it actually means. But that's the translation. Varishtham, more glorious. Manye, I consider. Tadarpita, surrendered under the lotus feet of the Lord. Manaha, his mind. Vachana, words. Ihita, every endeavor. Artha, wealth. Pranam, and life. Punati, purifies. Saha, he, the devotee. Kulam, his family. Na, not. Tu, but. Bhurimanaha, one who falsely thinks himself to be in a prestigious position. A translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. If a Brahmana has all of the 12 Brahmanical qualifications as they are stated in the book called Sanat Sujata, but is not a devotee and is averse to the lotus feet of the Lord, he is certainly lower than a devotee who is a dog eater, but who has dedicated everything, mind, words, activities, wealth, and life, to the Supreme Lord. Such a devotee is better than such a Brahmana because the devotee can purify the whole family, his whole family, whereas the so-called Brahmana in the position of false prestige cannot purify even himself. Reported by Srila Prabhupada. Here is a statement by Prahlad Maharaj, one of the 12 authorities regarding the distinction between a devotee and a Brahmana expert in Karma Kanda or Vedic ritualistic ceremonies. There are 4 varnas and 4 ashramas which divide human society, but the central principle is to become a first-class pure devotee. It is said in the Hari Bhakta Sudodaya, Bhagavad Bhakti Hinasya Jati Shastram Japastapa Aparanaisya Dehasya Mandanam Lokaranjanam. If one is born in a high family like that of a Brahmana, Kshatriya, or a Vaishya, but is not a devotee of the Lord, all his good qualifications as a Brahmana, Kshatriya, or Vaishya are null and void. Indeed, they consider decorations of a dead body. In this verse, Prahlad Maharaj speaks of the Vipras, the learned Brahmanas. The learned Brahmana is considered best among the divisions of Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. But a devotee born in a low Chandala family is better than such Brahmanas, not to speak of the Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and others. A devotee is better than anyone, for he is in the transcendental position on the Brahman platform. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita 14:26, Mam chayo avicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatitetan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. The 12 qualities of a first-class Brahmana, as stated in the book called Sana Sujata, are as follows. Jnanam cha satyam cha damashrutam cha hi amatsaryam hris titiksha anasuya yagyascha danam cha dhriti shamascha mahavrata dvadasha brahmanasya. Srila Prabhupada unfortunately didn't give a translation for this verse, but I will translate it as we discuss the purport. And so Srila Prabhupada continues, the European and American devotees in Krishna consciousness movement are sometimes accepted as Brahmanas, but the so-called caste Brahmanas are very much envious of them. In answer to such envy, Prahlad Maharaj says that one who's been born in a Brahmana family but is falsely proud of his prestigious position cannot purify even himself, not to speak of his family. Whereas if a Chandala, a low-born person, is a devotee and has fully surrendered into the lotus feet of the Lord, he can purify his entire family. We have actual experience of how American Europeans, because of their full Krishna consciousness, have purified their whole families, so much so that a mother of a devotee at the time of her death inquired about Krishna with her last breath. Therefore, it is theoretically true and has been practically proven that a devotee can give the best service to his family, his community, his society, and his nation. The foolish accuse the devotee of following the principle of escapism, but actually, the fact is that a devotee is the right person to elevate his family. A devotee engages everything in the service of the Lord and therefore is always exalted. Very powerful purport by Srila Prabhupada. I'll read the translation again for context. If a Brahmana has all 12 of the Brahmanical qualifications as stated in the book called Sanat Sujata, but is not a devotee and is averse to the lotus feet of the Lord, he is certainly lower than a devotee who is a dog eater, but who has dedicated everything, mind, words, activities, wealth, and life to the Supreme Lord. Such a devotee is better than a Brahmana because The devotee can purify his whole family, whereas the so-called Brahmana in a position of false prestige cannot purify even himself. So such a wonderful verse, and Srila Prabhupada Maharaj is so clear about the position of a devotee who has dedicated his life to the worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so if you remember from the third canto, in the 29th chapter, I believe, 29th chapter, Kapila speaks about the various categories of living entities. And he starts with living entities that have no legs and have 4 legs and 2 legs. So he kind of gradually builds up to, among all living entities, humans are the most evolved and the highest. And among humans, he says, those who follow the Varnashrama system are higher than everybody else. And then among the people in the Varnashrama system, the Brahmanas are higher than everybody else. And among the Brahmanas, those who understand Shastra are higher than everybody else. The Vipras who study the Shastra are higher than everybody else. And higher than those are those who can answer questions and clarify doubts in the context of the Shastras and so on. So he gives the whole gradation. And ultimately, the devotee, the pure devotee of the Lord, the spiritual master, is the highest living entity. So this whole classification is given by Kapila Dev. And so here, Srila Prahlad Maharaj clarifies that one may be in a very high position from a standard of Vedic understanding, or even from a ability to chant the mantras and everything else. But if they don't become a devotee of the Lord and they somehow become falsely proud, then all that is null and void. It is of no use. And a person who may be born in a family of a Chandala or a low class family, they become a devotee of the Lord, they are in a higher position. Like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Kiva Vipra Kiva Nyasi Shudra Kena Noy Jai Krishna Tattva Veta Shai Guru Hoy. So one may be a Vipra, one may be a sannyasi, or one may be a Shudra, it doesn't matter. The person who knows the essence of Krishna consciousness is a Guru. As Krishna says, right? He says, Sarvasya Chaham Hri Sannivishto. He's seated in everyone's heart. So if you understand the essence of the Guru, Matta Smriti Jnanam Apamanam Cha, Vedesha Sarvair Ahameva Vedyo, Vedanta Krit Veda Videva Chaham. This is 15:15 Bhagavad Gita. Where Krishna says, Vedesha Sarvair Ahameva Vedyo. From all the Vedas, I am to be known. And in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam as well, in the second chapter, I think this is text 28-29, that very famous verse, Vasudeva Paraveda, Vasudeva Paramakha. The whole sequence of Vasudeva is everything. He is the highest study of the Vedas. He is the highest performance of sacrifice. He is the highest performance of tapasya. Whatever we do in our spiritual and material life, to the highest degree we can do it, is Vasudeva Krishna. One who understands that is truly learned. Otherwise, you've just missed the point. Like you've studied the whole book, but you've missed the essence. So that is what the point that's being made here. So it's not like Brahmanas are being degraded here. So we should not somehow falsely conclude that Brahmanas are degraded and people who are not Brahmanas are elevated. Sometimes people get that wrong conclusion. That is not the point. The point that's being made here is that a Brahmana, while being the highest, but if they don't understand the point of becoming a devotee of the Lord and somehow become falsely proud of their position and their learning, become lower than even the Chandala, who somehow may not have great material qualifications, may not have great birth and so on, but have become a devotee of the Lord and surrendered themselves to the Lord, are in the highest position. And that's the contrast that's been drawn here. And so, Srila Prabhupada, as he says, that in this verse, Prahlad Maharaj speaks about the Vipras. Vipras are learned Brahmanas. So the difference between a Brahmana and a Vipra is a person may be a Brahmana by qualification, meaning that they have qualified themselves to become a Brahmana. But a Vipra requires special training, right? So not all Brahmanas are Vipras. A Vipra is a Brahmana who has undergone special training to become an expert in the chanting of the Vedic mantras. So that requires extensive training. So I know of people who Just like people go to school from grade school all the way through college, it takes 16 years of continuous study of Vedas to learn one section of one Veda. So, for instance, Yajurveda, Krishna Paksha, if you want to learn that as an expert, these are these Vedic Pathashalas that still exist. Many of them are in South India. There's some in North India as well, but mostly a lot of them are in South India, where you join at the age of 6 and you graduate at the age of 22 with a bachelor's degree. Essentially, it's like a school. So you live there like a Pathashala. You live there, you study all day, and at the age of 22, after 16 years, you become an expert in one branch of one Veda. Right? So then they're the Viparas because they can expertly chant the mantras. And as the devotees know, the Vedic mantras have to be chanted very precisely, else they can have disastrous effects. They can have the opposite effect. So these Viparas are expert not only have they studied the Vedas, but they can actually chant it in an expert way. So that is their position. And so Srila Prabhupada says, but a devotee born in a low Chandala family is better than such brahmanas, for he is in a transcendental platform. And Srila Prabhupada quotes from the Gita, chapter 14, the three modes of material nature chapter. He speaks about this verse where Krishna says, Mam choyo abhyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate. Abhyabhicharena means one without any deviation, does not fall down in any circumstance, Srila Prabhupada says. Vyabhichara means one who's materially distracted. So abhyabhichara means one who's not distracted in that way, doesn't fall down in any circumstance. He at once transcends the material nature. Sagunan samatitetan. The gunas, the three gunas, the material modes of nature, that such a person can transcend over them. Samatitetan. He can cross over them. Brahma bhuyaya kalpate. And he comes to the level of Brahman. Brahman is the stage of transcendence. So as we hear from in the first canto, Srila Prabhupada very elaborately gives the purport on that verse. That vadanti tattvavidas tattvam yad jnanavadvayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabdate. So the absolute non-dual truth can be realized in three levels: the Brahman level, Paramatma level, and the Bhagavan level. So the distinction between these three levels is they're all describing the same non-dual substance, the absolute truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But that same Supreme Personality of Godhead can be understood at three levels. The Brahman level is the understanding that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the creator of everything, is present everywhere. His energies are present everywhere, and everything is happening by his energies. So if your understanding is at that level and stays at that level, that is the Brahman realization of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then when we realize that the same Supreme Lord who's present everywhere across creation is also sitting in each and everyone's heart, as Paramatma, that is a Paramatma realization, as a super soul. And then we realize that in addition to being the all-pervading creator, and in addition to being the personality seated in everyone's heart, he's also an individual who's in Goloka Vrindavan, who's having all these sweet pastimes with his mother, with his cowherd boys, with the gopis, and so on. And that personality, Krishna, Vrajesha Tanaya, the son of Nanda Maharaj, that is Bhagavan realization. So somehow we should not be thinking that those who are in Brahman realization are low class. That is not the right understanding. Because all these transcendentalists, they're all great transcendentalists, far greater than what we are. Because we may think we are devotees, but we're just aspiring devotees. We are sadhakas. But those who are in the Brahman platform and the Paramatma platform are still perfected souls, but they're at a specific level of realization. Srila Prabhupada is very clear about this point. He says when he speaks about this that they're all great transcendentalists. But of the three, the those in the Bhagavan realization are the highest, and there's no question about that. Anyway, I will not go into the whole Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan, because that's a whole philosophical discussion in itself. I'll focus on what Srila Prabhupada is talking about in the purport as well, specifically on the 12 qualities of the Brahmanas. And so Srila Prabhupada says This is from the book called Sana Sujata. Now, Sana Sujata is not a separate book by itself. It is actually part of the Mahabharata. So as you all may know, the Mahabharata has many different sections. The Vana Parva, the Yuddha Parva, and so on. So different sections. The sections. So just like in the Ramayana, the books in the Ramayana are called kandas. So you have Balya Kanda, Ayodhya Kanda, and so on, right? So you have different Aranya Kanda, Kishkinda Kanda, Yuddha Kanda, and Uttara. So all these different sections in the Ramayana, Valmiki Ramayana, called kandas. Similarly, in the Mahabharata, which has over 200,000 verses, they're called parvas. There's a parva called the Udyoga Parva. Udyog literally means industry, or endeavor. So Udyoga Parva has this section which is a conversation between the Dhritarashtra and the sage whose name is Sanasujata. So this conversation is recorded in the Udyog Parva of Mahabharata. So Srila Prabhupada quotes from that part of the Mahabharata. So I just wanted to give you some context of what the Sanasujata conversation is. And it's part of the Mahabharata. It's not like a separate Shastra. So you have the context of what it is. And that verse says, Jnanam cha satyam cha damashrutam cha hi amatsaryam hri stitiksha anasuya yagyascha danam cha dhriti shamascha mahavrata dvadasha brahmanasya. Dvadasha means 12. Dasha is 10. It's like you have the Dasha Avatara Stotra. There's 10 primary incarnations of the Lord that Jayadeva Goswami described. Dvadasha, Dva means 2. Dvadasha means 12. So there are 12 qualities of Brahmanas that this book describes. Mahavrata. These are great qualities of the great 12 qualities of Brahmanas. And what are those 12 qualities? We can quickly, I'll just quickly translate. So Jnanam means knowledge. So Brahmanas have knowledge. And what knowledge? What knowledge do they have? This is specifically spiritual knowledge. Yeah. So when Krishna says, Matta smriti jnanam apohanam cha, so from me comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. Krishna doesn't mean knowledge of how to do material things, how to work on a computer, or how to do AI. That is not the knowledge Krishna is talking about. He's talking about adhyatma gyan, knowledge of the difference between the body and the soul and the actual connection of the soul with Krishna. That is jnana. And even in the Gita, chapter 13, from verse 8 onwards, Krishna speaks about the process of knowledge, starting with that amavritvam, adambitvam, those verses. He says, this is all knowledge, everything other than this is ignorance. So Krishna clearly defines knowledge, and that's what this knowledge has been described as jnana. Satyam, truthfulness. That's an obvious one. So Brahmanas have this quality of truthfulness. They cannot be deceitful just because it's beneficial to them. Srila Prabhupada says in many parts of the purports as well, when he speaks about Vaishyas, qualities of Vaishyas, he said, sometimes in business it is required to be not deceitful, but you have to speak in a diplomatic way. That, oh, I'm not making any profit, this is the best deal for you, and so on. So you somehow have to sell it to the customer. The true Brahmanas are unable to even do that. They are not in a position, and I've dealt with individuals who are very much in this quality. They are unable to even say something which is commonly accepted as okay, but they're just not able to do that because that's not how they're built. Dhamma means control of the senses. So they're able to control their activities, control their activities without too much endeavor, because that is how they're predisposed. They're able to control their senses pretty easily. It's not something that they have to. Of course, there's always an endeavor, but compared to the other varnas, compared to the Kshatriyas and others, the Brahmanas have an easier time controlling their senses because they control their mind, and their entire existence is based on spiritual life. And Shrutam. Shruti means to hear. Shrutam literally means one who's very learned. Right? So one may have knowledge, but then Shrutam also means one who's extremely learned. Right? So they are, and that correlates back to the point of Vipra that I was discussing earlier. So Shrutam, that's what it means. Amatsaryam. Matsarya literally means jealousy or envy. And there is some overlap between these qualities, so it's not like they're all mutually exclusive. So amatsarya means one who doesn't have the quality of jealousy. He's not jealous of anybody, not envious of anybody else. They generally are very self-satisfied. They don't have, that's one of the qualities of Brahmanas. Brahmanas generally are not wealthy. They generally have very humble existence in terms of just material possessions. And generally they're involved in learning and teaching and so on, and they get some dakshina from those who they teach, and they're satisfied with that. And that is their position. So they're not jealous of those who have more than them, because that is not their pursuit. That is not their goal. Hri means modesty. They're generally very modest in terms of, so they don't show off. They don't have anything to show off in terms of material possessions, but even their learning and their intelligence, they don't show it off. They're very modest in their approach, and that's how they are. That's Hri. Titiksha, all of you know, it means tolerance. This word comes in many parts, in many shastras. Even in the beginning of the Gita itself, text 14, chapter 2, Krishna says, Tam Titikshasva Bharata. Simply tolerate, right? All these different going and coming of happiness and distress, and like summer and winter seasons. So just learn to tolerate. That's the first lesson that Krishna gives Arjun. Tam Titikshasva Bharata. Oh, Arjun, tolerate. So this comes in many other verses as well. Even Kapila speaks about this, the qualities of a sadhu. Titikshava Karunika, Surda Sarvadayinam, Ajata Shatrava Shanta, Sadhava Sadhu Bhushana. So the first word in that section where Kapila says, Titikshava, be tolerant. So the Brahmanas are very tolerant. And Anasuya means one who's non-envious. So there's a little bit of overlap between Amatsaryam and Anasuya. Yeah. Krishna says in the Gita, right, 9th chapter, Idam tade gohyatamam pravakshami anusuyave. Jnana vijnana sahitam tad gyatva yad gyatva mokshase asubhat. So this knowledge I will give you because you're anusuya, you're non-envious of me. So Brahmanas have this quality of non-envy. Even among other Brahmanas, if they find a Brahmana who is more qualified than him, they will generally be very submissive to that more qualified Brahmana. They will not be envious of such a person. That is their natural tendency. And yagyas, so the Brahmanas perform yagya. So they yajan. So yajan yajan. So they also perform sacrifices. Then they also induce others to perform sacrifices. So yajan yajan patan patan. Brahmanas not only study but also teach, and they're related. So you cannot teach if you don't study. So if you don't continuously study, it's not possible to teach, because then your teaching will not be based on shastra. It'll just be whatever comes to your mind, and that is not the idea of teaching. So you teach what you've studied in parampara, and then you continue the parampara. So that's the system. So yagyas. So when they perform sacrifices, they also induce others to perform sacrifices. Danam is charity. So one may wonder, how can Brahmanas give charity? Because they don't really seem to have much. But the system is that Brahmanas give charity. So they receive charity and they also give charity. Because Brahmanas only keep what they need. They don't just hoard. That is the true quality of a Brahmana. So if a Brahmana is receiving gold coins from the king for being a participant or performer of a sacrifice, then the Brahmana will come, and if he gets 10 gold coins, he'll give away 9 gold coins and maybe use one for what that Brahmana and family need. So that is the tendency of how Brahmanas operate. They may get donation of cows and so on. So they will just give what they don't need for their maintenance to others. The Brahmanas also provide charity that way. And Dhriti means determination. So they have great determination. They're not easily swayed from their determination. So that's also related to the other qualities, that they don't get easily influenced by material things and so on, and they completely lose their focus. That is not how Brahmanas operate. And Shama means control of the mind. They're able to control their mind. They're able to be very patient and control their mind. They don't get distracted so easily. And as you can see, all these qualities are very closely related. Krishna speaks about some of these qualities in the Gita as well, as you all probably know. In the 18th chapter of the Gita, there's a section where Krishna speaks about qualities of Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. So in text 42, he speaks about Shamo Damas Tapas Shaucham, Shanti Arjam Evacha, Jnana Vijnana Mastikyam, Brahma Karma Svabhavajaha. So there he translates Shama as peacefulness. It's basically control of the mind. Dhamma is self-control. And as I said, Dhamma is control of the senses. So self-control means you're controlling your senses. Tapa, austerity. Shaucham, purity. Kshantihi, tolerance. Arjavam, honesty. Arjavam also means cleanliness. So you clean in your, actually, so when you say Arjavam, it means cleanliness. So Cheto Darpanam Arjanam. So that the cleansing of the mirror of the mind. So Arjavam means essentially cleanliness. In literal meaning is cleanliness. In the context, Srila Prabhupada translates honesty. So if you're clean in your dealings, that means you're honest. Jnanam is knowledge, Vijnanam is wisdom. And Srila Prabhupada also translates that sometimes as Jnana is knowledge and Vijnana is practical application of knowledge. So in commonly used Sanskrit, Vijnana literally means science. So when someone says Vigyan, in Sanskrit it means science. So you have different sciences like chemistry and physics. So they're all called different Vijnana because they're more practical application of a theoretical concept. Astikyam is religiousness. Astikyam literally doesn't mean religious. It actually literally means asti means exists. He is there. Astikyam means one who is firmly convinced that the Lord exists and lives his life accordingly. So astikyam means one who's firmly convinced of the existence of the Lord. So nastikyam means one who's an atheist. So the word nastika, na asti, is one who believes there is no God. So the word nastika means one who believes there is no God. Astika is one who is firmly convinced of the existence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Srila Prabhupada, so if you look at the synonyms of Srila Prabhupada, he doesn't actually literally translate the Sanskrit. What he does is he gives us the context of the word in the context of the verse and what we need to understand. So sometimes when Sanskrit scholars look at the translations of the verses and the words, they may debate that this word doesn't actually mean this. But if you look at the point Srila Prabhupada is trying to make, he always tries to translate the word according to the context of the verse and what we're supposed to understand from that verse. So it's not literally a literal word for word translation. It's really more of a contextual translation of the synonyms and the verse is what Srila Prabhupada does. I'm just giving you a little more context so you understand how these words are created. So here in this verse, Krishna says, peacefulness, self-control, austerity, purity, tolerance, honesty, knowledge, wisdom, and religiousness. These are the natural qualities by which Brahmanas work. And if you see the other words we read, those are kind of, a lot of them are overlapping. So they're not completely disjointed. So the concept is the same. So one may think about, just like in the Sankhya philosophy, there are 25 elements of Sankhya, but then if you look at some other ways of breaking it, someone may talk about 16, some may talk about 20. The subject matter is the same. It just depends on how you want to classify things and which ones you want to combine and so on. And that is discussed in great detail in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam as well, in the Uddhav Gita section, where Srila Prabhupada actually speaks about this, that while generally we say 25 elements, 26 elements, but based on how we look at it, some just get to 24, some get to 25. And if you include the soul, it's 25. If you include the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it's 26 and so on. So those are some of the discrepancies in the number apparently, but actually they're not discrepancies. It's just different ways of looking at the same subject matter. So Srila Prabhupada says that the foolish accuse the devotee of following the principles of escapism. But actually, the fact is that a devotee is the right person to elevate our families. A devotee engages everything in the service of the Lord and therefore is always exalted. So Srila Prabhupada has given us confidence that we shouldn't doubt ourselves that somehow we may not be doing what society needs from us. Because by being a devotee of the Lord, we are actually the highest well-wisher of society. Srila Prabhupada gives us that confidence. So those were some of the points in the verse. Apologize for the little technical explanation. The verse and the purport itself is a little technical, so I thought at least I would explain what Srila Prabhupada is saying in the purport. If there are any questions or any comments, please let me know. If I didn't clarify something or if I said something appropriate, please correct me. And if there are any questions, we can take that now or comments. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
I want to thank you for a very wonderful class to start with. I can always count on you to give a wonderful class.
Thank you.
You speak eloquently on every verse that you cover. You clearly have studied Srila Prabhupada's words carefully. You have assimilated the subject matter, and you're able to produce it very nicely, very clearly, and completely and accurately.
Thank you.
So this is immensely valuable. There is a dreadful need in society for people like yourself who can effectively represent what Srila Prabhupada has given us. And I'm just, I listen to you speak, and I'm thinking how, Srila Prabhupada would be very pleased by this. It's what he wanted of all of his disciples, that we study his words scrutinizingly and propagate that understanding. I'm thinking that you should really consider seriously any means by which you can expand your reach by recording videos or writing would be wonderful. Somehow or other, I think you should meditate in that way and let Krishna guide your hand and find somehow or other a means by which you can increase the reach of your preaching. That would be immensely beneficial for you and for everyone. Anyway, I'm
Thank you, Prabhu, for your blessings, and I'll take this as.
I'm just really appreciating your preaching. Hey, with regards to this accusation by the non-devotees of devotees being escapists, there was actually an historical point in time. And Srila Prabhupada is writing from that point in time when the movement was relatively young, and in Western countries, people were not so familiar with Vaishnavism, and this was one of the criticisms that was common at the time, that devotees were seen as escapists because they rejected material society. They weren't interested in the same kinds of achievements, limitlessly accumulating wealth and possessions, and um, uh, desperately trying to enjoy the material nature somehow or other. People did not know what to make of us. We were very different. And so there was this criticism that, the devotees are escapists. They just want to get away from the problems of their life, and they're no longer productive contributors to society. But Srila Prabhupada, of course, rejected their assertion, and he pointed out, he offered, various refutations of this accusation, and one of them was that if you're in a house and the house is on fire, it is reasonable to escape. No one will criticize someone for attempting to escape a burning house. That's the reasonable thing to do. You would be a fool, you'd be crazy if you did not attempt to get out. So the devotees are, they're not somehow defective because they choose to escape. Srila Prabhupada didn't necessarily deny that we were escapists. From one perspective, we kind of are escapists. We do want to escape the clutches of material life, because it's extremely dangerous. It means terrible suffering. We don't want to be a part of that. We don't want to contribute to the miseries, our own miseries and the miseries of others. We want to effect a solution. And the ultimate solution is to get out of this situation altogether, because it's very, very bad. It's like a house on fire. There is no real future in material life. The situation is absolutely doomed. Everything will ultimately fail. Whatever you try to do will ultimately fail. You're going to die. You're going to die. Everything that you acquire will all be lost. You can't take any of it with you. The house is on fire. You're going to lose everything. Why do you want to persist in trying to develop, to build up a sandcastle on the shore of the ocean that is doomed to destruction? Everything in material life is doomed, and none of it will last. It's not something you want to invest in. It's a really bad investment. You're going to lose all your capital, and it's sure and certain. You cannot win. You will absolutely lose everything. So it's a very bad investment. We want to invest in those things that will endure. You can call it escapism, but it's intelligence. It's good intelligence. It's not foolishness. It's not neglect of some kind. It's just exercising good intelligence. Anyway, the medicine, Krishna Kata is the medicine, and we need to spread that as far as possible. Srila Prabhupada had a great sense of urgency about this. And for those who had direct experience of Srila Prabhupada, that sense of urgency was unmistakable. It was unavoidable. You could hear it in his voice. Satsvarup Maharaj in the Lilamrita, I noted that in his writing he captured some of this. He would mention it on many different occasions, because he like many of Srila Prabhupada's disciples, and Satsvarup Maharaj was an early disciple. He had lots of experience of this. You sat in Srila Prabhupada's lectures. Srila Prabhupada might start off speaking calmly, and gradually, as he would speak, his mood would become more excited, um, and gradually reach a crescendo. His I'll read a few mentions from the Lilamrita that capture some of this. Satru Maharaj writes here, probably, and he's talking about Srila Prabhupada speaking. This, he's giving a class. Prabhupada's voice is earnest, persuading. Sometimes his speech becomes high-pitched and breaks with urgency. His cultured British diction bears a heavy Bengali accent. If you listen to some of Srila Prabhupada's lectures, especially the recordings of the early lectures at 26 Second Avenue, for example, you'll hear instances of this where Srila Prabhupada is speaking very excitedly, and you can absolutely feel his sense of urgency. From Srila Prabhupada's perspective, the situation was extremely urgent, a dire emergency, a matter of life and death, that people are suffering. They're suffering horribly. They're suffering terrible fates, and they're going to die. And the way that they are conducting themselves in ignorance, they are doomed to suffer terribly in the future. They will have to accept animal birth and undergo all kinds of horrible suffering for inconceivably vast periods of time. It's unimaginably horrible. And Srila Prabhupada was acutely aware of this terrible situation, and it pained him greatly. It gave him terrible pain to see the suffering of so many fallen souls. And he was desperate somehow or other to try to rescue them. And you could hear it in his voice, and you could see it in his actions, that he would never waste a moment of time. Not a moment was ever wasted. He constantly was preaching to anyone at all, whoever was around. He was constantly injecting Krishna consciousness with every ounce of energy he could muster. And if there was no one around, then he would write. But and whenever he spoke, he would insist that his words be recorded so that somehow or other he could expand his reach, that even after his disappearance, it would be possible for people to benefit from his words. He was very, very desperate to try to save others. And so there was always this intense mood of urgency. I'll read a little more here. Satsarup Maharaj says, and sometimes a guest suddenly speaks out with an irrelevant question, and the Swami patiently tries to consider it. Yet behind his tolerance, Prabhupada's mood is always one of urgency. Sometimes he talks quickly, and one senses his desire to establish Krishna consciousness in the West as soon as possible. He has no followers, only a few books, no temples, and he openly states that he is racing against time. I am an old man. I could leave at any time. So behind the formal delivery of Krishna conscious philosophy is an anxiety, an almost desperate desire to convince at least one soul to take up Krishna consciousness immediately. It's I don't know if I am at all effectively conveying what I experienced of Srila Prabhupada, that he had this immense sense of urgency, and it was based upon numerous factors. He was driven by compassion for the plight of the fallen conditioned souls. And simultaneously, he was driven by the words of his own spiritual master, who pressed him to spread Krishna consciousness in the English language to people in the West, that if he ever acquires any money, to print books. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had a great sense of urgency. He lamented that his disciples were fighting over rooms in the Bagh Bazaar temple, and he talked about how he would rather sell the marble so that he could print books. He was more interested in the preaching mission than simply establishing temples. And the sense of urgency that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had was, it infected Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada had that same sense of urgency. He, in turn, infected many of his disciples with that same sense of urgency. I have so many God siblings whom I have known to be possessed of that same kind of urgency. I can remember times spending time with His Holiness Bhaktitirtha Swami. And I would see that in his dealings with his disciples, sometimes he was relaxed and interacted with them in a casual, pleasant way. But privately, I saw that he was completely consumed by an intense mood of urgency, desperately trying to do something as effectively, as efficiently as possible, trying to somehow or other propagate Krishna consciousness as broadly and effectively as could possibly be done. And his mood of urgency was very, very intense. It radiated from him like heat from a fire. It was intense, very, very serious. He would not waste a moment. He was extremely busy. Between he and myself, there was no scope for casual interactions. It was all business. Amongst his disciples, he would sometimes speak casually for their comfort, but amongst God brothers, his behavior was different because we all had the same understanding. We had all experienced Srila Prabhupada's urgency. We felt that ourselves, and we imbibed that. And so between ourselves, we did not feel a need to try to relate to one another in a comfortable, casual manner. We would understand sometimes even curt interactions because the mission was at stake and there was no time to waste. So much needs to be done, and there's no time for pleasantries. There's no time to waste. It's a desperate situation. We have to hurry. So anyway, I'm thinking about that sense of urgency. I'm not even sure why this has come to my mind, but I've been doing a study of Srila Prabhupada's preaching on this chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam. And I'm just remembering how he spoke on this, because he gave many classes on these verses, and for each of these verses, each of them he spoke on many times. Sometimes he would speak on the same verse for several days consecutively. The first time he gave a series of lectures on this chapter was in 1968 in Montreal. That series went on for 2 months. And during that time, Srila Prabhupada spoke with an incredible sense of urgency. It was very early in the movement, but he was very systematically, step by step. If you study what he did, it was there. If you want to see an example of the genius of Srila Prabhupada, study the series of lectures that he sometimes delivered. He didn't just speak on a particular verse. He formulated an entire plan, gradually developing one's understanding across many verses, across many days. And simultaneously, he insisted that all of it be recorded and distributed all over the world. So he was speaking to a very broad audience. He was speaking across space and time, and with incredible urgency, and dumping on us so much information in a single lecture of approximately an hour. There would be so much information presented that it would boggle the mind. And so we're very fortunate that it was all recorded, because very hard for us individually to try to remember all of Srila Prabhupada's points. And speaking of those points, I attempted to, I was present for Srila Prabhupada's lectures on this chapter in Mayapur for 2 consecutive years in 76 and 77. Both years, at around the time of the Mayapur festival, Srila Prabhupada chose to speak on this chapter. That by itself is very significant, that at a time when all of Srila Prabhupada's foremost disciples were present, he chose to speak on this particular chapter, and he did it 2 years in a row. The same verse is covered again in 77 after doing it in 76. 76 in particular, he spoke for a very long time. In 77, the series was not as lengthy as it was in 76. By 77, there were other factors that were extenuating, and Srila Prabhupada's health was already declining very significantly. Most devotees were unaware of it at the time. I got to see personally some of what was happening because I was serving in Srila Prabhupada's entourage as a general gopher, and the guard for his room. That I'm digressing. That's another long story. The hints that Srila Prabhupada's health was seriously in decline, but that also became a tremendous incentive for Srila Prabhupada. He knew that he had little time, and so his sense of urgency was just always increasing. He became more and more desperate. He knew that he had very little time and so much work to do that it was impossible to get all that work done in the available time. And so he had to accomplish as much as possible in as little time as possible. Anyway, if anyone is, it's late now, but if anyone is interested, I could share some of my notes from the 76 lecture on text 10, this particular verse, Canto 7, Chapter 9, text 10. In 77, he did not speak on this verse. He skipped over it, but in 76, he did speak on it. My notes are terse, and I was not able to record everything at the time, but I had the opportunity to go back and review recordings of the lecture numerous times, and so I do have, I think now a pretty comprehensive set of notes on what specifically Srila Prabhupada had to say. But as I say, it's late and maybe we should just end, or perhaps others have some questions at this time. Thank you again, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
We can end, Prabhu. It's already late. Thank you. Hare Krishna.